Shanna is on her way. I just got a
Shanna's on her
text.
way?
Yep.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. All right, welcome you to the planning board meeting of May 13th. My name is Lucy Visson. I'm the chairperson of the planning board, and I call this meeting to order, and I would ask Amy Smith to please call the roll.
Roger Dupree,
Here.
Mark Roy,
Here.
Michael Marcotte,
Present.
Lucy Bisson,
Present.
Alex Pine,
Here.
Lee Albert,
Here.
Amy Smith, here.
Okay, and we are expecting Shanna shortly, so I guess we'll see if she doesn't show up, we'll do it. Okay, and just for the record, for staff members in attendance are John Connor, Director of the Planning Department. Shelley Norton is the city planner, and that's it. So, are there any adjustments to the agenda? Shelley?
No.
And correspondence, we have received some correspondence directly from Mr. Terrio and also from Ms. Norton relating to the same items.
Yeah, you have two. You have email from Matt Terrio and then one from Dennis Terrio.
Correct.
Yep.
Yes. Okay. Since the petitioners are not here for the public hearings, we'll skip on that and we'll go to the reading of the minutes. I would entertain a motion to adopt the March 11th, 2024 minutes. Could I have a motion for that, please?
So moved.
Second, Michael. Okay, and any discussion?
I don't have them with me, but were there any adjustments to the,
No, there were not to that
to
one,
that one?
not to that one.
And
Yes.
if we're approving minutes right now before Shanna's here, we do need to have Lee as a member.
Yes, okay, so
So if we can just have her in until,
until, yeah,
Shanna makes-
okay, so I'm appointing you at least temporarily to be a voting member this evening. So, and so now I'll call the roll. Roger Dupree,
Yes.
Mark Roy,
Yes.
Michael Marcotte,
Yes.
myself, yes. Ha,
Shanna Cox, yes.
Shanna Cox, yes.
Sorry.
Okay, no problem. Alexander Pine,
yes.
Amy Smith,
Yes.
okay, and so those minutes pass. The minute, and I need a motion for the minutes of April 22nd. Yeah.
So
No
moved.
problem. So moved. Do I have a second? Roger, okay. Any discussion? Now, there were adjustments to these minutes. Amy made some adjustments regarding the water levels, and the falls, water running over the falls for what is it, 8?
If I can just clarify,
Certainly.
the 311 minutes, there was a typo that you had noted, Lucy.
Oh, okay. But it would be insignificant. It's just a
That was a spelling
typographical
of
error.
somebody's
Yeah,
name.
Yeah, I think it might have been something like that.
And
Right.
then there was also, I think Amy had noted that we didn't have the last name of a member of the public.
Oh, yes.
So we did make that correction as well. And then for the 411 minutes, Amy had noted.
422 or
Sorry,
311?
yep, 422, thank you, had noted a difference in the, just a language preference for the FERC recommendations to City Council. In discussion with Amy today, staff clarified that those recommendations already went to council in that format, so we recommended not changing the minutes. Although we can certainly make changes to the language in the recommendations that go to FERC. So that was the discussion we had had.
Okay, is that satisfactory, Amy?
Yep, that's fine.
Okay. All right, in that case, I will be recusing myself since I was not at the meeting. So I won't vote on them. So, okay, so we have a motion.
Same here as well.
Yes, you were not here either. But actually,
You
it has
do have the
been,
opportunity to, we did clarify that once
that we can
procedure.
vote
Yes, you
on
certainly can vote on it. if
even
you
though
choose.
we were not at the meeting. So we can vote, I guess. Okay, so no further discussion? All right, in that case, I'll call the roll. Roger Dupree?
Yes.
Mark Roy?
Yes.
Michael Marcotte?
Yes,
Shanna Cox?
Yes,
Myself, yes. Alexander Pine?
Abstain?
And Amy Smith?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so, ready? Okay, so they're not here. But Mr. Saddlemeyer is, would we like to have his presentation now?
Yeah, we could ask the imam, would you like to start the meeting, your part of the meeting now without your architect, or do you want to wait until he arrives?
We waiting for the bill and.
Okay.
Allah.
Okay. Craig, would you be able to do your presentation now?
Okay, so we're going to jump to other business, and we're going to have a presentation by Mr. Saddlemeyer from Raise Up Housing Cooperative.
welcome back, sir.
Yes.
Yeah. Your two projects are looking beautiful, all fully done and developed.
They really
and
do look great.
It's nice to drive by them and say like,
Yep.
ah. Takes a while for housing to get built sometimes, so it's been lovely to see it.
Yes. Yeah, sometimes it seems like it just never gets built.
Feeling that way about the Pinewood property.
Well, that's never going to happen.
That's why we celebrate the ones that do.
Yeah,
what's the
absolutely.
name of that? Saxon.
Yes.
Saxon.
Yeah, thank you. I try not to mix that up with Sam. Two S's in my head. Some speed driving.
Lots of folders.
Hi, everyone. So my name's Craig Saddlemeyer. I live on Maple Street in Lewiston, and I'm the Cooperative Development Organizer for the Raise Up Housing Cooperative. We're a cooperative affordable housing organization based in Lewiston. All of our housing are in the Tree Streets. I'm going to talk more about that. But an introduction to why I wanted to present, Raise Up developed a strategic growth plan. It was a 5-year growth plan that we took us 6 years to finish, but we did finish it, and now we are in our 1-year strategic planning process for the next 5 years. So to that end, we have been surveying our residents, surveying our community partners on what we should be doing next. And we consider the city of Lewiston an important partner, community partner in that work. So that's the nature of tonight's presentation. I want to tell you a little bit about what we've accomplished, specifically with regards to housing. Development and operation of housing is certainly our focus. We do some other work as well. We were very involved in the planning work and grant application for the Choice Neighborhoods developments, among other things. Yeah, I guess I'll just prepare you that I'm going to present a little bit, and then I am going to, I welcome any questions about our programming, and then I do have questions for you as the planning board for the city of Lewiston about your thoughts on what we should be doing. And I have that broken into some questions that will come up with the slides. So I will begin. Here's a photo of some of the Raise Up members at our groundbreaking. So again, we are a cooperative housing organization. That means we're exclusively owned by our residents. There's no third-party landlord. We do have professional staff, but we have 15 cooperative members that own the organization together. And this was at our groundbreaking in 2022, April of 2022. So a little bit about what a housing cooperative is. It's a corporation where residents own a share of stock in the corporation. The par value for that share of stock can be set at whatever one chooses, but each member owns a share of stock that reflects their ownership. They don't own their units directly in most cases. They lease their units from the co-op, but the share of stock is, reflects their ownership. They can borrow against their share of stock lawfully in the state of Maine, use it as real property to borrow against. And those shares of stock, they can be, if the shares of stock are very, very tiny in price, then it's more of a symbolic ownership in terms of their ability to earn anything on it, but the shares of stock could be worth, could add up to the value of the asset itself. So the shares could add up to $50,000, $100,000, depending on how the co-op is structured. So they buy their share of stock, they pay rent. We actually call it carrying charges, but for the sake of the example, we'll describe it as rent. So they're paying rent to the housing co-op. That rent can be used to pay off debt to a lender, property taxes, insurance, income tax, other costs, whatever costs the co-op incurs can be passed on to the residents in the form of rent. Residents are the decision makers for the co-op. It's no matter how many shares one owns, if in fact there's an imbalance of share ownership, it's one member, one vote. Typically that means one household, one vote, but it could be structured differently depending on how the co-op is set up. In a very small housing cooperative, it's rather simple. Basically all the residents or all of the members, and when they meet, they make all of the decisions for the co-op. As the co-op gets bigger, as ours has, we have multiple sites. So we have a board of directors that's elected by the members. The board of directors is made up by a majority of residents, and the board of directors is making high-level decisions for the organization, and then each building is meeting as a committee of the board, basically to make decisions about their building, to discuss the operating budget, and maintenance and improvements needs, and make proposals for the board to basically approve in terms of the next year's operating budget, rent, and maybe capital improvements they'd like to do with their property. There's three basic types of housing cooperatives. There's market rate housing co-ops, in which a share of stock can be sold for whatever it's worth at the time of sale. There's limited equity housing cooperatives, where there's some sort of affordability restriction on the share value. And then there's group equity, where the residents cannot earn anything on their shares. They can't earn dividends. They can't sell them for any kind of profit. The share value is fixed. What everyone enjoys in these scenarios is typically savings on their housing costs. But there is a difference in affordability, and particularly affordability on the shares. Our organization started as a limited equity housing cooperative, and we evolved to be a group equity housing cooperative in order to meet the needs of lower income residents and be a more inclusive organization. So in general, market rate would serve people who can afford market rate housing. Limited equity might be more in the 60 to 120% AMI range, so like moderate to middle income, and group equity is serving. We have residents in our housing co-op that are middle income, but majority are low income to very low income, especially when they apply. Some folks have grown their income since they joined, but started as low income. So today we have 33 apartments, we have 90 residents, and we have 6 buildings. 5 of those are residential buildings. We have one small commercial building. That little blue building there was once a bakery, was once a driving academy. Today we have a little space for our office in the back, and the front is a locally owned childcare business. So our most recent accomplishment was developing 18 new units of affordable housing. We completed them in August of 2023. We have 9 units here on Walnut Street, and then another 9 units on Blake Street. So that was 84 Walnut. This is 198 Blake. We're very proud of this project. Here are some highlights. So these buildings include 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom, and 4-bedroom apartments. As I said, it's 9 units per building. Each building has private yard space for the residents. It's 1-to-1 vehicle parking. It's actually slightly more than 1-to-1. It meets the zoning requirements. It also includes bicycle parking. It includes ADA accessible units on the first floor. heating, cooling, and ventilation included with each unit. Each unit has its own private washer-dryer system. It has dishwashers. There's rooftop solar that provides 50 to 60% equivalent of the building's energy needs. And there's rain gardens on site to help with stormwater management, to manage almost all of the stormwater on the site. So that's a bit about the physical setup of the building. Some development notes. So these buildings the rent's restricted and the units are reserved for households at 60% area median income and below. We received over 500 applications for these 18 units. This is the first certified passive house building in Androscoggin County. Passive house is a very sort of rigorous energy standard, both energy and air quality standard that a third party certifies based on performance measures. It's both based on design concept, but then they come and they actually measure how the building performs, and you don't get the certification until you've met those measurements. This was the first building to go through the design district overlay procedure. There was no rezoning required. The properties pay regular property tax. RaisOps never sought any special treatment as far as property tax goes for any of our properties. This was a 4% LIHTC project. Main Housing was the funding partner. It is not a true cooperative because of the funding source, which it was a very hard compromise to make, not one that we necessarily knew we'd have to make going in. We tried to fund this a different way when we started, and we were not successful in obtaining the funding. And we weren't seeing a clear path to doing it exactly how we wanted to. So what the compromise is essentially that this is it's a LIHTC development. It is rental housing. These residents cannot be owners of the RaisOp, but RaisOp is still the owner of the project. And to the greatest extent that all of the rules and regulations will allow us, we're including the residents in the decision-making process. So they meet as a house committee like our other buildings do. They'll get to review the budgets. They'll get to have input on the condition of the property, maintenance priorities, ways to use surplus revenue, and they will have representation on our board of directors. So we're trying to back in. We're starting with learning what all the rules of the program are, and we're backing in as much of the cooperative elements as we can. Shanna?
Can you let folks know what 60% of AMI is in our area?
Well, it changes each year, and it depends on the household size. So
Whatever number gives you some.
Yeah, I would hazard to guess that $45,000 a year might be a two-person household at 60% AMI.
Thank you.
And
Yeah.
then just really quickly, if you eventually exceed that threshold, do you have to move out?
You don't have to move out, no. It's just when you apply.
Okay.
So yeah, when you just have to qualify at that when you move in, and then once you're in, and as long as you can pay the rent and follow the lease requirements, then you can stay as long as you wish, and if your income goes up, then you keep your money.
Can I ask just a clarifying question, Craig? So when you say two-person household, do you mean two wage earners?
Just two people.
Two people, okay.
Yeah, so one of them might be earning a wage, or they both might be earning a wage, but yeah, area median income, when you look at like the table, it's just based on how many people are in the household, and it could be one adult with kids, or it could be numerous adults, but in terms of like 100% AMI would be what the average household income is for the area, and 60% is, 80% is what's considered low income, and then 60% is, 50% is considered very low income, 60% is,
Between the
I
two.
forget the word, but a little bit more than very low income. It's even more weird. It's like they call it 120% of very low income or something like that, and then 30% is extremely low income.
Sure.
And in our other properties, we have households that meet all of those levels, including extremely low income. But this is the standard for these particular properties.
Thanks for clarifying.
And I'll also add, this is the upper limit of what a LIHTC project will fund. So it could be up to 60% AMI. They don't fund projects for households of greater income than that. So the design that we made in the spirit of promoting, good housing development of any kind, the design is available for free on our website. So anyone could go to the website right now and you'd be able to get some of the very basic floor plans like this. But in addition to that, for folks that really want the details like our pro forma and detailed, like hundreds of pages of like detailed designs and all of that work is also available on the website. For that, we just have folks fill out a form and tell us, what they want to use it for, but it's free. You could use it for project estimation. You couldn't quite use it to build a building immediately. You couldn't put those designs out to bid, but you could show them to an architect and say, I want to do this, what would it cost, or a construction firm, et cetera. So raiseup.com/passivehouse for anyone who's interested in that. We partnered with some Bates students to do an analysis of this particular building and a building of a similar footprint that you might renovate. And what they came up with I thought was pretty interesting. So we're looking at the carbon impact. When you add the cost, the carbon impact of new construction with renovation for this particular type of passive house building, how does that compare to the carbon impact of new construction and operation for a renovated building? This is assuming the renovation project is like down to the studs, and renovating to a similar quality that we built. Not exactly the same, but kind of as far as you could get it with a down to the studs renovation project. What their conclusion, which was not necessarily what I expected, but what they concluded was that within 15 to 20 years, the new construction would equal the carbon impact of the renovation project, and then after that would exceed it in efficiency. One thing this does not include is that they did not calculate was carbon impact of a demolition if you were demolishing something. But to sort of thinking along those lines, another thing we had them look at is carbon impact per person housed. And what they did based on looking at average residential density in the neighborhood and average number of units per building in the neighborhood, they found that the average building houses 15 people in the tree streets. If one was going to demolish and build new, the average building in the neighborhood, so if you're going to demolish a building that would house on average 15 people, if you build back a building at the standard that we did that houses 25 people or more, then on day one you're meeting and then beginning to exceed the efficiency of the building that you're replacing, because you're housing more people within the same footprint. So the questions I have, and maybe I'll show you all the questions just so that you can think about them kind of comprehensively. So the first set of questions is, which type of development should RaisUp be prioritizing in your opinion? Affordable housing for low-income households, market rate housing for moderate or middle-income households, traditional cooperative housing, whatever group is served, or lastly, just whatever adds the most housing to the local supply. Different ways of approaching that question. And then the other question is, where would you prefer RaisUp locate new development? Would you like to see it in the tree streets, in downtown more broadly, outside of downtown specifically, anywhere in Lewiston, or other cities or towns beyond Lewiston, or no preference. So I'll jump back to this slide and invite more clarifying questions about the raise op or responses to these questions.
Personally, whatever adds up to more housing in the community at this point, whatever works best, because we need housing. And there's some down in the pipeline, but it's going to take a while before that stuff gets done. So, Roger, do you have an opinion?
How are you going to be competing with the Choice Neighborhood project?
How are we going to be competing with the Choice Neighborhood Project? Well, as I said, we're a big supporter of the Choice Neighborhood Project. Nothing really feels much like a competition at the moment because the housing demand is so extreme. As I said, we had 500 applications for 18 units. So, I think the Choice is going to be able to fill their buildings pretty easily, and we filled our buildings pretty easily. We have a wait list. So now there's two wait lists. There's one wait list for Blake and Walnut. There's one wait list for our traditional properties. For our traditional properties, the wait list, I think the most recent applicant applied in 2019 or 2020. We refresh it every year. There's 50 applicants on it. So we're serving a similar geographic area. We're serving a similar income population. If we're doing LIHTC developments, then I think the route through which people apply and the way they have to be managed and applications are processed, I think like the general population wouldn't see a difference between our project and the Choice properties when they're applying. I think it's just a matter of like what's the next available unit, they'll apply to that. For our other properties, because we have more complete control over the application process, the folks that end up in those buildings are a bit more primed. Like they're applying because they specifically want to live in the housing cooperative, not just because they needed affordable housing. That might lead them there, but they go through an application process that's a bit more rigorous in terms of explaining what the housing cooperative is and conditions for being involved in the housing co-op. So yeah, it's not. I don't think it's a competition. It's really just there's a huge demand that isn't being met, and the efforts are complementing each other right now.
Have you got any in the pipeline?
No, we have no plans at the moment. The point of this plan is to really get input, and I feel like there's a lot of different ways we could go, and we want to play the role. We've always tried to sort of do whatever we think no one else is. That's something that's needed, but that no one else is going to do. That the other nonprofit developers that are out there aren't doing, and that the private market isn't going to do itself. We're trying to meet a need that isn't being met by those other actors. Right now, it's a completely honest question when we say, what do you think we should prioritize? We're going to get input from a lot of different folks before we make our decision, but we have no projects in the pipeline at the moment.
Mark?
Well, I do want to.
You want to speak into your...
I do have a question, maybe I missed it. So the shares, how are they issued? Just as an applicant?
The co-op sells the share to the member.
At just the.
So the co-op can choose the par value when it starts.
Right.
Today, because we're a group equity housing co-op, our share is $10. You just buy one share.
But is that, so each property or all properties are part of the co-op, and thus you're a member of not just a particular property, you're a member of the co-op itself? Is that how it works? Yes, right. You're a member of the co-op, and then you lease your unit at a specific property. And the part that gets confusing is, the caveat is, this is for our traditional cooperative housing. For the LIHTC, for the 18 new LIHTC units, the funding rules do not allow those tenants to be members of the raise op. Right, so you have fewer members than you actually have residents.
Yes,
Okay.
right. We have 15 members, and we have 15 units of housing in our traditional cooperative housing.
Yeah.
And they each own a share of stock worth $10. That, you know, that $10 doesn't really do
No,
much
but
for
you said
anyone.
that you could borrow
And-
against it, so I'm like,
Yeah, you can't borrow against $10, but
how
what
would
I-
I, no, well, no, I'm talking about a regular share of stock, of share of the cooperative stock, how would you borrow against that?
So, so a co-op could be set up, for example, like if you were going to actually finance your project entirely with money from the sale of shares, then let's say just to keep it simple, like it's going to cost $100,000 to develop a unit.
Yeah.
And you're maybe doing 10 units, and you're going to have 10 households, 10 members. So you're selling shares. You know, someone needs to buy $100,000 worth of shares to in order to gain access to lease a single unit. They can, like the law, the statute that governs cooperative housing says, like, interest in the cooperative is real property.
Right.
And basically, a bank can loan you $100,000 or $80,000, whatever amount of risk they're willing to do, to buy your share of stock in the co-op.
Mm-hmm.
And in the event that you default, they could get that share. And depending on the bylaws of the co-op might guarantee that share. So the bank might then say, here's the share, give us our money. And then the co-op would honor that because they said they would in their bylaws, and they want banks to be willing to lend. Or if that's not in the bylaws, then the bank would have to sell the share to another incoming member in order to recoup the principal that it's owed. So it could be set up that way, and the law's there to support it. No one has, to my knowledge, no one has done that yet in Maine. It's done elsewhere
Right.
in the country, but
Okay.
in Maine, I don't think it's been done yet. CEI tried it a number of years ago. That's how I was exposed to the concept, actually. I lived in a building that was supposed to be converted to a co-op, and that buying cost was somewhere around $35,000, $40,000. But folks that could get a loan or could afford that share buy-in were not interested in living on Spruce Street in 2005. So they just converted the building to regular rental.
Okay. So that's very interesting to me because I've not heard of a housing co-op before or understood really how it gets financed. So I'm probably going to look into that just for my own personal knowledge. But to answer your question, my personal answers are really whatever adds to the most of the housing supply. I mean, I get the need for low-income housing and trying to target specific income households, but frankly, I think everybody, regardless of your income at this point, needs housing. So I would answer number 4, and then for the second question, my own personal answer is I actually would like to see more development in the streets behind Central Maine Medical Center. I think that's
The seasonal neighborhood where summer, winter, spring
Right.
lives.
I think that's a prime area to develop an actual neighborhood with, walking,
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a cool neighborhood. I like that
items,
neighborhood.
places where you can actually walk to pubs and corner stores and barbers and all that, all within that one area. So that's where I'd like to see.
That's good. Mr. Marcotte?
Earlier, the question was concerning competition, but I'd be more interested in knowing about cost effectiveness between your program and other models.
Yeah. Our project was expensive. Like the new development we did was expensive. I don't know exactly where we rank, but put simply, I mean, it's not so much about like the cooperative piece. It's basically a matter of scale. So if you want, the most cost-effective project is going to be the biggest one. So yeah, from efficiency standpoint, you do bigger. What we developed is what code allows, and what I wanted to do was see, like, without asking for any changes, just working within what code allows, what could we do, and what seems to fit the scale of what exists in the neighborhood. And we had to get more money from Maine Housing to do that. We happened to do it during a time when there was so much upheaval in construction costs that we were able to get what we asked for from Maine Housing. I haven't gone back and reviewed what the latest restrictions are, because they do have a limit on per unit costs. And depending on what funding stream, we did the 4%, which is a less competitive application process because you have to raise a lot more money yourself. We had to bring a lot of our own money to the table to do this development. 9% is more competitive, and in 9% in particular, that's where folks like the per unit cost matters even more. So yeah, the bottom line is it's not so much about the cooperative model, it's more about the size. And to get the most efficiency, you do a really big building. But there's also, you know, I support all the different affordable housing efforts that are taking place, but I also hear a lot of interest in infill, the type of infill development we're doing that feels to fit the architectural character of the neighborhood more. So we went for what we heard the community wanted in this case, but it did cost more.
You going to answer the questions?
No pressure.
No, you don't have to. I mean, I'm just,
I'll pass.
okay. Shanna?
Yeah, so I love this first question, and I feel like my answer to the second question would be dependent on which of these gets selected, so transparency. The reality is all of these are good answers, and all of these are needed. I feel like the market is starting to solve, even in the tree streets, for market rate. I think that we're getting to a place where you're seeing market rate investments, even in Lewiston, and for a long time it was just affordable housing that was being built or renovated and opening in Lewiston. I would like to continue to see affordable housing be a portion of our overall development so that we continue to have mixed income neighborhoods, that there's upward mobility in those neighborhoods, and that we're not segregating people with low income, which I think had been a traditional pattern of development for a really long time, specifically in our community. With that said, it really is about whatever can make it work. If the financing that you can access that creates new inventory is specific to affordable, what I've seen happen is the market adjust for that. And other affordable housing, whether it's affordable and subsidized, specifically affordable, or if it is just attainably affordable, right? That some of that converts to market rate. And so I think, you know, continue to watch the market and do what's possible with the resources available to do the most. I'm with Lucy. In terms of where, I think Mark is 100% on. I'd love to see that neighborhood get some investment. I think the most thing that's compelling about the work that Raise Up has done is it increases commitment to the neighborhoods that it's established in, even where your folks have like slightly less cooperative ownership in the traditional model. There's a buy-in to the neighborhood, a stewardship to the neighborhood that I think creates a better local neighborhoods, safer neighborhoods, and at the end of the day, a stronger local economy due to reinvestment. And we've seen that in the neighborhoods that your properties are already in. And so I think that that's really an important piece. And so I would be looking for neighborhoods that have low home owner occupancy. However you might fit that into your questions. I know it's not a survey box I can just click, but.
All right.
Oh, and sorry, I do want to add one thing that I forgot to mention during my presentation. Our hope is that with the properties that we developed with the LIHTC funds, our hope is that one day they will become traditional cooperative housing. Mm-hmm. It's just a matter of when the other financing terms expire and allow that kind of conversion to happen. So that's still our end game, but it could be a ways off, and how long is yet to be determined.
Sure. And I agree with Mark and Shanna. I would love to see not necessarily just the tree streets, but to go a little bit further out, where in neighborhoods where it might be a good idea to bring some new housing in. Mr. Pine?
Well, this is cool to hear more about what you do. Been a fan for a while. So yeah, I think, short answer on this question is, yeah, whatever adds housing to the local supply, I think it's good, Rising tide floats all boats. One thing I do wonder about, I think it's great that the co-op gives people agency and sort of, the ability to have buy-in to how their living situation is controlled. I think that's a really wonderful thing. One thing I do wonder about, and I understand, why you're in the model that you're in now is, in the U.S., home ownership or, apartment ownership, condo ownership is such a pathway to climbing the class ladder, to, making it ahead in the world. It's certainly for my family, it made a big difference. And so I wonder, are there avenues within your cooperative model that could allow for that? Right now, the way your share structure works, it doesn't as much, right? People aren't really building equity, if I'm understanding it correctly. But it also sounds like, sort of the more traditional, members financing the co-op model, which I guess for folks who are less familiar with that, that's closer to like a condominium with sort of more shared power structure, if you want to think about it in that way. Could provide for that, but no one's been able to make it work. So,
Yeah, and I think that's on the table for us. We could develop market rate or limited equity for a higher income earning population. We'd have to navigate the different corporate formats to get there, but I think it's on the table for us. What folks get in the group equity scenario, what they get is savings. And yeah, they cannot earn anything on those savings via their ownership in the co-op. They could invest those savings in something else that earns them money, but it won't be in their housing.
And there's no like dividend structure or anything like that.
There's no dividend structure.
Okay.
They can participate in discussing how to use cash surplus in ways that benefit them. Improving the property, making improvements that will maybe help lower their housing costs or doing things like that. But
got it.
they're not
But
gonna get
no
it.
sort of like, I want to I want to go use some money that I've gained through my equity to go get a conventional home loan.
Right, that they can't do.
Okay, got it. Yeah, and then in terms of like neighborhoods and places in Lewiston, I think for me personally, having this model anywhere in the city seems to make sense to me. Anywhere where multifamily makes sense or whatever housing type you are developing, why not? Like folks were saying, it does provide buy-in. It means people are going to be invested in their neighborhoods, and that's a good thing. That's just a good thing overall. I'm on the planning board here in Lewiston. I live in Lewiston, so I have a natural preference that you look at Lewiston first, but happy to share with the other communities if we have to. So I hope that's enough of an answer for you.
Amy?
I too think whatever adds the most to the supply, but I do want to just point out that the really cool thing about the co-op is it gives people housing stability with a very low buy-in, as opposed to home ownership, which is a higher buy-in, right? And that combined with the democratic, oversight is amazing. And just when folks, and correct me if I'm wrong, Craig, as I understand it, is when all the members of the co-op set up the operating budget, they're basically looking to break even, so that their monthly fee or rent or whatever you call it isn't going to arbitrarily be raised by some unknown entity. So I just think that the role that the traditional co-op plays in the old continuum of housing choice is really, really important. So I'd personally love to see even more of that, just because it's it's like a step function better than renting. And again, because you're just paying what it actually costs to operate the property, that's where people realize savings, because their rent doesn't just go up for no reason. So
Thank you.
that's what I think.
Sure. I would add, I think, similar to Shayna, I would say all four, but if forced to pick one, probably four, so whatever adds the most housing to the local supply. In terms of locale, I think definitely adding to the downtown would be fantastic. The idea of crossing Main Street and what that could mean for flow downtown could be really interesting. I would also throw out there, I know it wasn't an option, but just thinking about being near a school, and as we think about shifting communities in America, schools used to be the center, you could argue, of how community was built, and so could there be housing near a school, thinking kids could then walk to the school, families then more deeply invested in the school community? Just would put that out there as a precise thing to consider. And then may I ask, well, I can remember one question, I might think of the second. How do you all select your applicants? So you have 500, is it the board of directors that reads the applications?
So there's two different application processes. One's for our traditional cooperative housing, the other is for the LIHTC. The LIHTC is more, basically Maine Housing says how they're selected.
Got it.
And it's basically income eligibility.
So it's
and first
numeric.
in line is pretty much
Okay.
how that's determined. And that's pretty much this, it's similar for our other housing, except for our traditional cooperative housing, it's a more, the application process is front-loaded with a lot of education about what the cooperative is, and questions asking them to commit to being involved in the governance of the cooperative.
Yeah.
And I think that process does not impact. We still have, as I said, we get folks that income qualify. We have a very diverse population of co-op members in terms of like just who you see when you walk around the downtown neighborhood. But we get a group of folks that are primed to like understand that they're going to work with their neighbor to make decisions. And
Sure.
some people are not interested in that, so they stop applying.
Got it.
Once
Got it.
they learn about that part of it.
Right. And then I'll just say, I appreciate you asking, and, it sounds like you're doing a bit of a listening tour or mini focus groups, but I imagine too, you'll do some sort of feasibility study to understand where there is demand when thinking about these 4 questions, or is
Yeah,
this-
we'll definitely do a lot of research before we take the dive.
Yeah, yeah.
Financially.
Yeah.
So any development we'd do, we'd look at what the actual demand is for that specific thing and cost to build and before we go for it.
Excellent,
Yeah.
thanks.
Okay, thank you so much, Craig.
Yeah.
This has been very enlightening, and good luck, and hopefully, we'll see you come before the board in the not-so-distant future with another project.
Yeah, thank you for your time. We're hoping to publish our new strategic plan in December. So if we stay on schedule, that's when you'll hear what we came up with.
Okay, all right, sounds
Thanks so
good.
much.
All right, thanks so much.
Go get busy.
Yeah, right. Okay, so now we'll go to public hearings. So our first public hearing is Apple Valley Estates LLC has submitted a re-examination and reapproval request for the unbuilt portion of the Apple Valley Estates subdivision, which was approved for 48 houses and a recreation building on 92.46 acres located off Pinewoods Road. And Craig isn't here, so Shelley, I assume?
Gardcrow, who's the owner, is here, and I'm
Right,
just
but
gonna
I mean,
pull
would
up
you
for him.
give
Oh,
us-
yes, happily. Yep, sorry. I just want to pull up for you the site plan. Sorry, there's a lot of sheets here, so I just need to figure out which is the
First,
right one.
apologize for being late. This was not my attire I planned to wear tonight. and I didn't plan on being late. Thankfully Shelley called me.
Thank goodness she
One thing
called
that
you.
got me in a different direction.
I think
Apologize.
this is the area that we're focused on. Yep, okay, great. Okay.
That resonates.
Sure, absolutely.
Okay, so, this project was approved in 2007. It is a 48-lot subdivision with a community center and tennis courts. To date, the applicant has constructed 26 houses, as well as the community center and the tennis courts, and is requesting approval to complete the remaining 22 houses, which includes the proposed Vista Bella Drive. And so that will conclude the project and is the final phase. Based on our ordinance, if a project is not completed within 5 years from the date of granting approval or the extension, which this did receive an extension, then it would expire and they have to reapply. And that's outlined in our ordinance as a reapproval and reexamination process. And as part of that process, then they would need to respond to any significant changes in circumstances that may have occurred between the date of the original approval and their reapproval. So the stormwater has been reviewed and is still sufficient for the project. There have been no changes to the city road standards, so there's really no changes there, or any other of the standards that would be impacted. So at this point in time, staff isn't seeing anything that needed redesign, and neither did the applicant's engineer, and we're recommending reapproval. The conditions of approval that we are showing in the staff memo are largely the same as the original conditions of approval. There were a couple of minor tweaks that we made because the first approval talked about things that would have to happen before the final phase. This is the final phase, so we took out that language.
Okay. Okay. Anyone on the board have any questions for staff?
Just a comment that I would acknowledge, some things in the housing world went really crazy after late 2007. So the fact that you got the majority of this done at all is really impressive.
Absolutely. Okay, so if there are no questions, I would ask the applicant to identify himself and tell us what you want to give us any information.
Well, thank you, Lucy. My name is Gard Craw. I'm the owner-developer of Apple Valley Estates. It is something that wasn't here when I moved back home. I'm a Mainer. I moved away for 35 years, and when I came back home, this type of housing didn't exist in this area. It did outside. Highland Green in Topsom is a similar example of what we're doing, what I'm doing, but nothing within the Twin Cities. It's a lifestyle that I've always enjoyed, and I thought others would. Back in 2007, we first started. We were ready to start offering the product in 2008. If any of you remember what 2008 was like, we didn't sell too many. And frankly, it wasn't really until like 2016 that it took off. We built the first phase in those first 4, 5, 6 years, but once we built the Cortland Way Street, 2016, they had just all sold quite quickly. I actually have 67 names on my waiting list. I turn people away every day, which is not fun. So these 22, we want to finish. We have the folks that want to move in as soon as we can get them built. But my permit expired, and that's why I'm here.
Okay.
I'll answer any questions that you
All
may
right.
have.
Anyone on the board have any questions for Mr. Craw? Michael?
I noticed that the application was from 2007,
Correct.
and there's no updated financial capacity, which obviously times have changed in 17 years for financial capacity. So I was inquisitive as to why there was no update to that document.
It wasn't, no one asked for it. I banked this whole thing, has from day one.
Well, it's one of
Hasn't been a bank involved.
Yeah, it's one of the criteria that we look at on development reviews, and I don't know why staff would not have enlightened you. But
Well, I think, Mike, like, there might have been the reason for that first phase, because I wanted to start building houses. That was the only reason they required it, to my knowledge, and I gave them a cash bond. It wasn't required any further. Once we built out McIntosh and the city accepted the street, there was no other bond required, if that means anything to you.
Would you be able to speak to the financial capacity that you have to complete this phase as presented?
It's a drop in the bucket, $774,000 to build this phase out. It's not nothing to worry about for me. I mean, we have the money, I have the money. But we're not even, I mean, we have to build it to city specs. You don't accept the road unless we do. There's no liability, at least as I see it, to anybody but myself, because I can't sell a house until it meets the city's specs. We do the third-party inspections, it's required, so we know it gets built to the city specs.
Okay. Shelley, why wasn't a financial responsibility letter asked for this phase? Or is it not usually done?
That might be a staff oversight, given that the ownership didn't change. I don't think it was flagged for us that a new financial capacity would be required. Certainly, there will be a requirement for a performance bond or guarantee for the road work.
Right.
That will be required at the time of, any application for a building permit. But if you wanted to
Should we
require that.
make it
you
a
could-
can we make it a requirement?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, all right. Yes, Roger?
Guard,
Yes, Roger.
in the reading through this, everything keeps going back to reference to a declarant. Now, the declarant is you?
That's me. It was me, Roger. The first 10 years, I was the declarant. After that 10 years, it gets turned over to the homeowners, and it has been done. And there's an active board of 5 members that serve on the Apple Valley Estates HOA.
Okay.
Excellent.
Yep. My control is over, other than building each lot as they're sold.
Okay. Anyone else?
Nice job out there, I tell you.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Yeah,
I
it
know
looks,
quite a few people out there, and everybody likes it.
yeah, it's a nice area.
They tell me they're happy, and that's important.
Anyone else have any questions for Mr. Krakauer? Okay, in that case, I will open it up to the public. And if anyone wishes to speak in favor or against, please step to the podium. You have 3 minutes to give your opinion. Anyone want to? No? Okay, in that case, we'll close it from the end. Further discussion, or I will entertain a motion.
I'm happy to make a motion, hearing if there is no further discussion.
Doesn't appear to be.
Okay. I'd like to make a motion that the application submitted by Sebago Technics, Inc. on behalf of Guard Craw of Apple Valley Estates LLC meets all of the necessary standards contained in the zoning and land use code, including but not limited to Article 13, Section 4, approval criteria, Section 5, coordination with state subdivision law, and Section 11, expiration of approval, and that approval of the construction of the remaining 22 houses and completion of Vista Bella Drive constituting the final phase of the Apple Valley Estates subdivision be granted with the following conditions. 1, that no building, structure, or other facility shall be located within the 50-foot perimeter buffer except as shown on the plan. 2, prior to the issuance of a certificate of occupancy for the final phase, the city will require verification from a third-party engineer that the stormwater system for the phase has been installed in accordance with the approved plans. Items deemed out of compliance will require an appropriate bond or other surety. Roadways, number 3, and associated stormwater appurtenances, thank you, shall be maintained by the developer or homeowners association until such time as they are accepted by the city as public streets. 4, the stormwater management system not associated with the roadways accepted by the city shall be maintained by the developer or homeowners association. 5, that no lot or parcel of land may be conveyed and no permit may be issued by the city for any building or other permanent structure within the development until completion of the street grading, paving, storm drainage, utilities, and other similar improvements are specified in the plan, and the acceptance of any public improvements by the city unless a performance guarantee is provided to the city's satisfaction per Article 13, Section 12. The use of the community building must be associated with the homeowners association and residential development. And 7, that proof of financial capacity to complete the project as proposed is provided.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Roger, okay. Any further discussion from the board?
Would we want to say financial capacity before building permit is issued? Would that be the language we'd use? I think that's what we've used in the past.
That sounds great. Can you
Yeah.
amend my motion to reflect?
Yes.
Roger, you will accept that amendment?
yes.
Okay. No further discussion, I'll call the roll. Roger Dupree?
Yes.
Mark Roy?
Yes.
Michael Marcotte?
No.
Shanna Cox?
Yes?
Myself, yes. Amy Smith?
Yes.
Alexander Pine?
Yes.
Okay, all right,
For
good
the
luck.
Thank you,
record,
Lucy.
if we could just
Good job.
clarify why Michael Marcotte
Yeah,
voted
yeah.
no.
I was going to explain to Mr. Craw that I have nothing against the project. Staff fully understands my concern with criteria T in one of our sections. I prefer to have the financial capacity here during the review process, not as a condition of approval. But other than that, I loved everything that was in here. Okay.
Okay, all right, thank you so much. Okay, public hearing number 2. Masijudul Salaam Mosque has submitted a development review application to expand the existing parking lot and increase the occupancy of their existing building located at 240 Bartlett Street. Item was continued from January 8th and 22, February 12, March 11, and April 22, 2024 meetings. Shelley?
Okay, so, staff has revised our memo as well as the draft findings and conclusions for your review. The applicant has submitted a revised application, revised plans, and we had gotten clarification from Public Works that they really don't have comments substantive to the approval of the application. They may have some discussion in the field with the applicant during the stormwater installation, but there's really nothing that would prohibit, recommendation on their part for approval of the project. It's designed by an engineer, and it would work as designed. So you have those comments from Jeff Foley, city engineer. There has been a lot of discussion with one of the police officers who's been on site on Fridays for a period of weeks now. And certainly he's noted traffic violations that are taking place as well as people trespassing. However, there's no official comments or concerns from the police department on this application, which we clarified that today. And I've spoken to the fire department. In both cases, they're requesting a lower occupancy than when the police and fire had weighed in on this previously, and the same parking design. So as far as the basics of what they normally would look at for considering review, there's really no change in their comments at all. I'm happy to run through my staff memo if you would like, or any other information. The basic changes are reduction in request for occupancy on the women's side, which is the northern side of the building. The application had asked for 84-person occupancy. They're now asking for 70. On the men's side, they had been asking for 124 occupancy. Now they're asking for 122. And the parking of 48 cars has not changed, so that's the same as what they were asking for.
Shelley, it sounds like you're fighting a cold today. Can you be careful and speak into the mic? Because I caught like a good 80% of that.
Okay, sorry about that.
You don't have to repeat it all, but that's so much better.
Yep, sorry.
Thanks.
Okay, anyone have any questions for staff? Yes, Roger.
Sally, have you gotten any feedback in regards to the monitors for the parking?
I haven't spoken with the mosque about that lately. They are no longer using the Colisee, and they are, I don't know how that's been working as far as what they've been doing for monitoring, but they have been certainly putting out cones and redirecting people, letting people know when it's full on site. But what happens off site, they really, don't have control over that.
Can I think this is a just checking question / comment, but to Roger's question, I think one of the communications that we saw from representatives of the mosque was that if cars were parked in areas they shouldn't be parked, then the process of having them towed should be done, because they're not able to safeguard parking that's not theirs. And so I think a follow-up question that we might get answered in the room tonight is active removal of cars that aren't in alignment with the parking rules happening?
I don't believe that the police department is having that done at this time.
Do we know if nearby private ownership is doing that, where their property is marked? Okay.
I haven't heard on that.
I think I just got a nod from the back of the room, but I'm sure we might hear more in public comment, but that's helpful, thank you.
Okay.
3 separate abutters that have had vehicles towed. Mark them out, is that cars towed?
We're totally gonna make you say it again in public comment.
In public comment,
Sorry.
Yeah, you can't.
We're gonna
talk.
wanna hear it, but.
Okay, yeah, that's,
When she bangs the gavel.
when I bang the gavel. Okay, so,
Here's the problem, Lucy. We only get 3 minutes.
I know you do.
Trying to explain a project that they've had weeks to prepare.
I know.
There lies the problem.
Okay, so can we get is it going to make any difference to the board if we hear more comments from the applicant? I don't think so. Okay. Anyone on the board feel that they need to hear from the applicant again?
I think the applicant needs to present for us to go into public comment. Are we asking if we skip the applicant and move to public comment?
No, I'm
Or
just-
do it out of order?
But no, I'm skip the, do we need to have the applicant address us?
They weren't here at the last one when we carried it, and I think the last time, my recollection and my personal desire to hear from the applicant is that the last time the applicant sat before us, we requested some alignment of the numbers that we'd seen in previous applications in the presentation, and then what was being discussed that night, and I'd love to make sure that we are in alignment.
Okay. If the applicant would please come up to the table, identify yourself for the record, and I think I'll just open it up to questions from the board to the applicant instead of they're just stating lots of stuff.
That sounds great.
Okay, so I do have a question.
Okay.
That now that you're not using, so you are not going to have an agreement with anyone for additional parking?
That is correct.
Okay. Anyone else have any questions for the applicant? Absolutely, Amy, please.
So I'm not sure if this is a question, I guess it's a question. In being on site a couple of the Fridays during the heaviest traffic, it became clear that signage is a big deal, sort of, and I just didn't see anything in the plan that clearly marks the entrance and the one-way and the exit, and that would just, I think, make a big
Okay.
difference.
No, that is no problem. I agree. There's no problem at all in putting a sign that says entrance and exit. That, I don't think that you have any problem with
Okay,
that.
so we could make that a condition?
Yeah, I mean,
Absolutely. No, I think
yeah.
I think that's fine. I heard it before, and it is not shown on the plan, but it would be.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Anyone else on the board have any questions for the applicant?
And this is more
Yes.
of a, just sort of stating for the record, because, I think it's hard to see with all the numbers. Right now, the applicant, you are requesting an occupancy that is less than what we have on the books in terms of number of people per car space. Maybe that's more of a question for staff?
They're asking for an occupancy of 192,
Okay.
and they would have 48 parking spaces, so that's
Yeah.
a 4-to-1 ratio.
And what we're asking, but really the ask is not for that total number,
Right.
it's for 23 spaces. And the previous occupancy was 95?
94.
94. So we're looking at 101? Am I doing my math wrong?
192 occupancy.
See,
and
okay.
48 parking spaces.
Yeah, but the real request is actually
An expansion of 23
23
parking spaces.
and an expansion of just under 100 for occupancy on the building.
98.
98.
Right, which makes it 4 4 people per vehicle,
Which is what we have,
which what we
vehicle,
had the
correct.
previous application.
and that is what's on the books in terms of
That's correct.
what we
Correct.
have for houses
We,
of worship.
and we,
Yeah, so to be clear, right now you have a 94 occupancy, and divided by the 25 parking spaces, that's a 3.76 persons per parking space. So they have something that's just slightly more generous than the 4-to-1 existing. And they're asking to increase that
To 194.
right.
For
So
48
if you-
parking spaces.
If you separated it out and said an additional 98 people and 23 parking spaces, that's 4.26 ratio. So they're asking to have a 4-to-1 ratio for the entire site, for the entire occupancy.
what we tried to show, what I tried to show for this was to actually show because it's unique in that it's a different kind of assembly, was to show exactly how many people could fit in that building, and how many people that would relate to the number of parking. And make it easy for me or anybody else to see how those numbers came together. This plan doesn't show it, but if you see the site plan and the floor plan of the building, then this shows the parking spaces, the building plan shows the number of people that could occupy that building.
And has this,
This hasn't
the
changed.
parking plan has not changed
It
since the
has not
initial
changed.
application?
No.
So we still have a drive lane along the property line, drive lane in the center, circulation around the back, and then exit out the side?
Correct.
Plus circulation on the front for the 2 handicap
Right.
spaces?
With the addition signs, because I think those signs I think that's a very good, I have heard it before,
Okay.
and it should be done.
And Alex, just the one other thing, they are increasing the curb, so they're blocking one of the existing curb
Correct.
cuts, right, as I
Correct.
understand it, because that's one of the things that caused a lot of confusion about,
Got it.
as I coming out.
That's that
so-
gray area on the bottom there.
Right.
Got it. So we're going from 3 curb cuts to 2?
Right.
Okay.
Clear.
Correct.
I have a question. I honestly am not sure if it's for the applicant or the staff.
Okay, fine.
Just take a
Ask
wing
it
at it.
and-
Yeah, thank you. We had a lot of previous discussion about the way in which we increased occupancy and where we allocated that occupancy to. To what extent does today's motion and updated application reflect that conversation?
Can you be more specific about what parts of the conversation you're asking
Sure.
about?
We were directed, so we've been having some conversation, and the numbers that we just talked about were the previous occupancy, which was in one area, and there was no occupancy allowed in the other, and the previous amount of parking spots that were allocated. And the conversation that we're having now is both about the total available as well as the additional new to get to that total available. And in the discussion for occupancy which is a big part of today's discussion, outside of parking, that we needed to be allocating the occupancy relevant to the 2 different zones within the building. And I heard some reference of it at the beginning of our conversation, and you gave me some new numbers. I'm just not sure where they land in here and how that's reflected in the application of which our motion would be related to. So there was an increase of 122 in the men's prayer area and new occupancy of some number I didn't catch.
70.
Thank you, in the women's prayer area.
Yeah.
Is that clearly stated in this application, and our motion would reflect that? And
It is, yeah. And I think the main message that I got from the fire department when I had talked to them previously was they wanted to make sure that the occupancy was set for each area as opposed to a total for the building. So they have done that.
Okay. May I have a follow-up question?
Absolutely.
And this is to the applicants. So the cross-hatching on there does a great job at laying out the 10 square feet per prayer mat and the limitations that both of the rooms would have based on that. Currently, if it's Ramadan and you're having a very big prayer cycle and you have 140 people show up, what do you do with the people? Do you run 2 prayer services, or how do you manage the overflow if there isn't space for a prayer mat in the space? So it's one thing to say this is all that will fit in there, which is real, and then it's another thing to look at people desiring to, I've seen lines outside the Basilica on Christmas Eve, right? Like, so how do you handle the over demand, if you will, during a particular service?
I think I'd like to, Abdullahi maybe can either corroborate or tell me I'm not being clear. The prayer mats are not just brought in and set down. They are there. It's like seats in a theater.
Exactly, which is why I'm asking about what they do with the people who don't fit in the seats
No,
in the
no,
theater.
no, I do understand, and I'm not trying to
Yeah.
question that, because
I
I'm
just felt like the
guessing,
gentleman would be well suited to answer my question, and it looked like he was about to.
Could you identify yourself
Oh,
for
my
the
name is
record?
Abdullah Hassan. Sorry, I can't talk in front of you. Usually we don't deal with that too much because there's 2 mosques in Lewiston. If we do have that issue, we haven't actually dealt with it at the moment. Usually when that happens is Eid, and we rent a place. But Ramadan, it doesn't get too crazy.
Right. I have a question. So, I mean, it has been counted. I mean, Shelley's been there, other people have been there on a regular Friday, and they've counted, you know, it's supposed to be 94 people max now, but they're counting 120 or whatever it is. So how do 120 people fit in, you know, because you're supposed to have 10 feet so that you can do the prayer properly, correct?
They're made in squares.
Yeah, I
So
understand that they're painted on the floor, and
Yeah.
I understand that. But I mean, if you've got 94 squares, and you've got 120 people, how do they,
do?
you know, what do you do? Do they have two, are you 2 people to the square, or, and I'm not being facetious,
No,
Do they have to wait outside, or?
yeah, do you have to wait outside, and the first person, you know, a bunch of people make their prayer, and then they leave, and the other people come in and take their place? I mean, I'm just trying to understand
So
how
usually
logically.
what happens is the people that come at the last minute, they come in after the prayer is over. So those other people leave and they pray. They can't pray the Jum'ah prayer. They pray regularly. So they pray regular salat. So they would pray alone while the other people are leaving. So the people that actually come to the prayer at that exact time pray, and then they leave. So they either leave the lobby or they walk out, or they pray separately.
So basically, if you're late, you're standing out in the hall?
Yeah, basically, yeah.
Okay,
You can't pray.
you can't.
Because you're late.
Because you're late,
Yeah.
okay.
So that's the issue we have, is the people that come late. They usually have to wait, or they have to wait outside, because you see that there's always people outside the mosque.
Mm-hmm,
So that's what happens.
okay. Okay.
Because
Anyone else?
those squares are counted. You can't really.
Right, yeah, I understand. It's like seats in a church or a theater. I mean, you know, do I sit on your lap to pray?
And-
You know,
and
that
our-
doesn't work that, it doesn't usually work that way. So-
Usually our rule is, if you come in the mosque, you have to listen to the lecture.
Right.
Before you can pray the
Okay.
prayer. If you miss the lecture, you have to pray regular.
Okay.
Salat when everybody leaves. So that's the rule.
Okay. All right, anyone else have any further questions for the applicant? Okay, so I'm gonna poll, I understand that the Mr. Serio would like to have more than 3 minutes to discuss. Would we want to grant them a different amount of time to allow them to express their thoughts, frustrations, what else? Roger?
Yes, I agree that they should have the additional time.
Okay, Mark?
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
Michael?
Yes.
Shannon?
I'm fine, I wouldn't want to go beyond 5 minutes, and I would want you to assume that we've read all of the communications, too.
Okay. Alexander?
I agree with Shanna on this one.
Okay. Amy?
Yep, so
And-
5 minutes is what we're setting it at?
Okay, so let's set 5 minutes, okay?
I mean, I'm just curious.
Yeah, Give him 5 minutes, okay? Okay, in that case, I will open it up to the public. You have 5 minutes. Please step to the podium and identify yourself. Go to the podium and
We don't make the rules, we just play by them too.
yeah, we're just playing by the rules that we've got. So I'm sorry, Matt, but
Oh, not a problem.
Thanks.
Matthew Terrio, 239, 245, 243 Bartlett Street. I guess before my 5 minutes starts, can I just get my questions answered? You guys said that you already read my paperwork, and I haven't received an answer from Shelley, which seems to be normal lately. I guess I'm just looking for some answers. There was supposed to be, I believe Ms. Cox had requested last meeting that we had, that each department on their letterhead, I believe you said exactly, report back that they have no issues. And I haven't seen anything other than Mr. Boley's. So I'm just looking, is there some piece of information that wasn't provided online so that I can adequately respond to it?
I did notice that the summary from each department was included in tonight's packet, and that it said no comments from each of the departments.
Right, but that's not what you had requested.
That's right. Do you have enough?
we do have a correspondence that Shelley gave us from the police department and from the fire department.
Thanks. Were you able to access those online?
That was not online.
Would you like to see it?
Yes, I would.
Here you go.
Yeah, please.
There's enough of us, we might be able to scare up two if you'd
Yeah,
like.
we got 2 here.
3 even? You got one for each hand. There you are. Mr. Terrio, would you like one? Here you go. We've got plenty of it today. We're happy to share.
Share, yeah. Okay, so I will start your 5 minutes now.
Okay. Hate to keep beating a dead drum on this, or keep beating my drum, but in the paperwork that Shelley provided, she said that they're already utilizing the grassed area that's there, and that's what she said in her paperwork. If they're already utilizing it and we're having a parking issue, how is increasing the amount of people allowed to go to the mosque going to fix any of this? I understand that they're going to dig up the grass and put reclaim. But right now, they're already parking there, and that's what Shelley had put in her notes, and that's what we've provided in our pictures. So we're not actually increasing any parking, we're just making it a better surface to park on. And I'm trying to figure out how that, in any way, shape, or form, fixes any of the issues that we have currently going on. Looking at even the placement that's there, what's given as a footprint doesn't actually work. If you tried to come in with a trash truck and even try to get at that dumpster location that's there, you apparently have to drive over 3 cars to try to even get in there. And that's once you drive in and try to maneuver this truck and turn the truck around within the property, access the dumpster, and then magically spin this truck around again. And you've eliminated a curb cut that's there, so now all the traffic has to try to go around the back side of the building. I might be a little familiar on heavy-duty trucks. That's what we do for a living. You can't make the swing out of the backside with a dumpster. So the guy's literally going to be exiting out the inn, which brings me to the other point of nobody seems to be addressing 256 Bartlett Street with the easement that's there. You're eliminating a curb cut and having everything come in now. How does 256 exit this property now? Because they have an easement to exit out that curb cut that you're now creating as a one-way in. I'm just figuring out how this is all going to work, or we're just going to magically figure it out later. I discussed stuff with the police department, and they say, well, we're just here to respond because planning has allowed this to happen. How much longer are we going to keep kicking the can, and each department just blames the other one back and forth for the issues that are going on? As an abutter, the issues are still there, whether it's a planning issue, a police department issue. I guess I'm wondering, as an abutter, what do we do at our end? We consistently keep getting people parking on our property, blocking our property, and we're told that magically now the mosque is not responsible for this. If a bar had this kind of issues, you guys would look at it and go, we're not renewing your liquor license because you guys are having functions that aren't adequate for the area. If we're going to do that, then why even have a parking requirement? If they're not responsible for people, just give them an occupancy permit and be like, hey, park wherever the hell you want. It's not our problem. It's very discouraging as an abutter to hear this and say that, well, you know, they're having functions here, but they're not responsible for any of the people coming. Should I just start having functions and have tractor trailers parked all over the city and say, hey, guys, I'm not responsible for it, just give them tickets? I'm the one drawing to them to that location. Would I not be responsible for that if I'm creating a nuisance in the area? I guess I can't wrap my head around saying that they're not responsible for bringing all this to the area.
Thank you.
I know.
Anyone else wish to speak in favor or against?
My name is Dennis Terrio. I own the properties at 243, 245, 239, 241 Bartlett Street, which is complete the other side of the street. I sent to you a response for a number of items that you have in regards to your review process and why they fail. Both in items like landscaping, whatever else. I guess my biggest concern is obviously this 256 Bartlett Street that seems to be ignored all the time. I have asked in the past here to have a larger blow-up plan of both properties and overlay and how they impact each other, okay? There is no way with the easement that 256 is pulling in, under their easement, they have a right to pull out on the same easement. They do not have any easement or documentation to pull out on the 240 Bartlett Street side around the building. They have nothing. Now let's understand one thing. Down the line, these two properties could be sold separately, but you're treating this as if it's one and allowing things to happen back and forth. 256 Bartlett Street came up, well, they need more land. Okay, fine, so you sold the back piece of property, which opens up a Pandora's box for future sale of city property abutting schools. What you didn't check, which normally, and I know because I set the requirements when I was sitting on the planning board, that all departments input before a sale of property happens. Now, what you would have found out is that Jeff Boley, which he indicated in his notes, there is no way of attaching 256 Bartlett Street as far as their parking lot stormwater because there's nothing there to attach to. So where do they go? So you basically sold a piece of property that's going to fail because they can't handle surface water because they have no place to put it, according to Jeff Boley. Now, Jeff Boley also explained that this is going to be reclaimed material on this section that's going to be used for parking. However, he also explained the reclaim has to be maintained, but he also said you can't maintain striping on that. So you're going to stripe or attempt to stripe. How are they going to be forced to use X number of parking spaces when they won't even stay on reclaim? So this is all going to be haphazard parking, which is no different than what's happening right now, except it won't be grass, it'll be reclaim. And then when you have this type of conflict, even on the entrance, then you build up traffic on Bartlett Street, waiting for them to clear whatever they have of where you're going to put a car, and you have no stacking capability. We've done this for CVS, Rite Aids, whatever, okay? When they come in, if they don't have enough, they have to have a stacking distance to come in to be able to maintain that. There's nothing here. And as far as the Lewiston Police Department, I have to give them total credit for sending someone down and attempting to address this. However, the right person to have here is Officer Ryan Gagnon, who has witnessed all this. He's witnessed it with Shelley. He indicated to her that there is a problem down here. Other than that, I don't know what more to do for you people. There seems to be no way of telling people to stay off my property, don't block the entrance, and you can't tow a vehicle if it's in the street blocking your entrance. We have no right to do that. That has to be a police action. Once they come in our yard, trust me, they're going to be leaving, but it's going to be expensive. Now, the bottom line is, I don't know what more you want us. I went to the city council, we got a signage, okay? Not to block the entrances on both sides and whatever. Shouldn't have had to do that, but we did. Let's put it this way, my grandfather built this building. We've been there almost 100 years. We've never had this type of thing, ever. Neither have the Mayats, neither has Italian Bakery, neither Rick LaChapelle at his place. This doesn't end. And according to your requirements, they have to provide off-street parking and not on-street. It's in there, I made the note for that. There is no way they're achieving this without on-street parking. No way whatsoever. When I built my mall, I had to provide 72 parking spaces off-street, with nothing being on the street. I did that. Jumped through all the hoops, did everything. And I also explained financial capacity. When I built my mall, I had to actually show a bank book that I had with $250,000 in it to be able to do my mall.
Thank you.
Understand, if this doesn't get corrected, we're going to the next level. You're not going to like that.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak in favor or against the project? In that case, I will close it and bring it back to the board, and I will entertain discussion.
I have some comments I'd like to make.
Comment, discussion?
During the public comment, there was a couple of comments related to 256 Bartlett Street, the additional property, the reclaimed, the scale. And I just want to note very clearly that the application I'm viewing and taking action on tonight is 240 Bartlett Street. Nowhere in these plans is it referencing 256. I appreciate the easement, and I'm going to circle back to that in a second. But nowhere in here am I factoring in the additional spots that might be available at 256 Bartlett Street, nor in the additional add-on at 256 Bartlett Street. I'm making a statement to you, there's not many faces to look at, and these were some of the comments that you'd offered. And so just for what it's worth, the occupancy numbers that we've been presented and the parking numbers, the parking spot numbers that we've been presented is reflected of what is available on 240 Bartlett Street and does not reflect the additional property adjacent.
256 is an integral part of what's going on.
I'd like to name that use and enforcement is different than parking and occupancy, and that our purview is the parking and occupancy.
Not when you have a joint use.
We're not going to go back and forth because you got public comment, and I'm going to speak as
I've
a...
sat on this board and I understand, okay, when the butter is agreed, okay, that I listen to both sides and what's impacted and what is not. We can do this in court.
You've interrupted me a number of times, sir, and what I'm offering is a reflection that I did listen.
But you didn't understand.
Sir, I'm going to ask you to respect myself and everyone else on this planning board.
Well, I respect everyone else on the planning board. If you don't know what you're talking about, which I do, and I live there.
I'm not going to engage in this conversation with you.
You will in court.
Sir, I'm not going to take threats either.
It's not a threat, that's a guarantee.
Okay, enough.
There's no reason.
Public comment is closed, so please,
Let's get this done.
go ahead, Shanna.
Nowhere in our application does it reflect 256 Bartlett, nor does it reflect the additional parking spots that might be considered an additional lot that's been made available to 256. I state that because what has been raised in public comment and what I don't see addressed here on displays from 2021 that haven't been updated, which is this one right behind me, it doesn't address how we are doing a two-way and what we're making a one-way for an easement on the additional property. So while I can't consider additional parking spots being useful or not useful relevant to this application on any other parcel, the existing easement hasn't been addressed. And I'm not sure how to reconcile that with the request in front of us. Because this is specific to 240, which has an easement to its property adjacent. And if we make that one piece one way and cut the curb cut, what is the recourse, and where is there documentation that notes that a change to the easement's been made that addresses that? I don't understand that. So that's a piece that I'm holding a question around that I don't feel settled about. The second piece that I just want to name is, and this goes back to my comment about parking and occupancy being in our purview and different than use and enforcement, is that I would have a hard time, once the easement is addressed, not approving this application as presented because it fits within our current zoning. Making an exception for our current zoning because of malalignment or inability to stick with what your occupancy limits are or zoning limits, I'm not going to vote on a change to the property's use that limits its use in the future, but it is very important that the occupancy and use lines up with and is enforced relative to what's being asked for and approved here at this board. And that is something this board is not responsible for. I appreciate neighbors who take an active role in engaging to support enforcement, but that isn't part of our decision-making process or purview. It isn't a liquor license, it's a use license with very clear engagement there. It's important that the occupancy sticks to that. That could look like carpool plans, it could look like more walking. Not gonna limit the number of people who can pray simply because we can't get the parking spots figured out, but that is an enforcement issue. And the last note that I'd like to make is I'm really not excited about the public perception of trash talk in between departments. And that is a note for the record for department heads and department staffs in each department, and an invitation for them to show up in public comment and represent their own voice in this space. Thank you.
Any other Michael?
I don't know where to begin. I caught a different sentiment at the beginning, and then it seemed to shift a little bit. However, I've taken notes, made plenty over the weekend, and as far as the two properties, granted that we may not be doing a development review at this time for 256 Bartlett Street, but it's a common interest. We've seen the easement agreement. We see the traffic flow being a one-way. The easement doesn't give a right to go all the way around. We've heard discussion tonight about the difficulty for a garbage disposal vehicle to do its business. At first, I didn't see a problem with it, but the way that the dumpster is turned, you got to basically come up the lane with the two, the Vs, the 6 parking spaces on each side, because you can't lift it and going straight up the lane that's right on the property line. I'm also concerned, I haven't done the study, but we don't have buffers, we don't have setbacks, maybe it's not required, but there is a 20-foot easement there. And we know right now that the vehicles that park at Mears parks perpendicular to the building. They go up that travel lane, they go across the parking spaces that aren't there now. And when they go to leave, traditionally, they'd want to just back out and come out nearest to Mears. Now they're going to have to go around. The easement doesn't address that. It wasn't revoked, it wasn't expanded, so that's a concern. The curb cut, the curb cuts may be great for 240 Bartlett Street. It's not great for 256. It doesn't have one. Now, I know that the back parking lot's really not an issue for discussion right now, but sometime in the future, if they do have their drainage for the back parking lot and they put in their development review for back parking lot, I would expect that there'd be a request to put another curb cut so that they can have a 2-lane traffic down the side of their building. And maybe then a fence can go up between the two or some demarcation. And this discussion about reclaim, it's right here in the St. Laurent proposal.
Forget that.
Yeah, I know, forget it, because it
No,
had a
it's not right.
30 day.
That reclaim is not a part of this application.
Well, it's part of the, it's part of the packet.
Wait a minute, I understand, but the engineer and I called a while ago and I said, how do you expect to use reclaim and have stripes? And that point appropriately was brought up as well.
Okay, so it's acknowledged, but no, we only have what we have in front of us to work with. And as far as whether it's reclaim or now it's going to be asphalt.
No, it's got to be asphalt.
Okay, so now it's asphalt. So this $59,400, which has already expired, is going to be much more than $59,400.
Yes.
And there's been no letter of financial capacity with the packet.
No,
So I'm really concerned about that. I don't want to just have this go through the planning board to the next stage with a condition of approval, which I'm not even sure if that's in the condition approval at this point. And and then have something else, some other snafu. But as you're engaging me here, at the last time that we met across the table, which was probably 2 of our meetings ago,
Yeah, at least.
because it was just a continuance at the last meeting, I asked for a traffic study, because I really believe that there is an adverse impact to the neighborhood. I brought up life safety issues. I mentioned the fact that if we have a fire apparatus coming down that hill, and that's a slingshot down there. People come down that hill and they slingshot. If somebody's unloading a car and it's just a private person going too fast, you're going to have a life safety issue. If that's a fire apparatus trying to go to a structural fire in downtown Lewiston, you're going to have a problem. And so as far as criteria B is concerned,
Okay.
I am voting against this for that very reason. There's a couple other items in there. I think D and T are also on my mind that I can recall right now without looking at my notes. So I'm not approving this tonight.
That's fine. I understand.
All right.
I
Anyone
appreciate
else?
I appreciate your comments.
Okay, anyone else have any questions, comments regarding this at this time?
So
Yes, Alex.
trying to connect things in my head here. Going back to what Shanna said, you know, what we're really looking to approve tonight, because we keep talking in the gross numbers, and I'm just going to go back to what I was talking about before, where we're actually talking about a subsection of that. And Shelley, from the math that you just did earlier in the meeting, it sounds like what we're really approving is a parking to occupancy ratio that has slightly more than 4 people per car, 2/10 of a person more per car. Or am I misremembering the math here?
No.
No, I think it was the new increase gives us higher than 4. And when averaged with the former, gets us to 4, which is regulation.
But aren't we're not reconsidering the former, we're only
No.
considering
Right,
the current one.
correct.
And so what we're talking about is a greater than 4 per car.
I mean.
It's 4 1/4.
Yeah, like a little bit.
You can reconsider what was in the past. You can't take away what was approved to the applicant, but you could make a change, like the request to allow occupancy in the southern part of the building, or northern part of the building, for example. That's a new approval. You could make a change in your approval to occupancy and parking for the
And we can
totality.
add more occupancy to the portion of the building that already had occupancy
No,
in the past.
Right, yep, that's,
Got
yeah,
it.
you can do
Got
that as
it.
well.
And we can add more parking. Okay.
Okay.
To the extent that the property can handle more parking.
Yes,
Okay.
yes. I mean, a little parking garage now. Let's not go there. To me, it sounds like the real big legal sticking point here right now is the access for the abutting property under that easement. And that really just needs to get spelled out along with the signage that Amy brought up in the
And
application.
access for the dumpster.
Access for this dumpster, I think, you know, I used to be in the waste hauling business, kind of, and I wonder, you know, if the dumpster is on wheels, you could probably roll it out, but I think it is an interesting question that probably could deserve a little bit of time to be figured out. I'm wondering, does it make sense for specific requests to come from the board in terms of what we're looking for the easement? Okay,
Or-
and for the signage?
Or at least specific, like, what are the issues that you need more information or revisions or response on?
I have a process clarity question.
Absolutely.
My recollection, and I'm looking at a couple of my board members on this one, the way in which we heard this and continued it last time instead of tabling it was an intentional choice to allow for tonight a new application to be reviewed that addressed some of these issues and got us to a favorable location. Wherever you were headed with that, this is the 5th time a version of this application has been in front of us, continued or tabled. Is that roughly accurate?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is the 6th
Yeah.
this is
And
the
so-
6th appearance.
I guess I'll form it as a question, but procedurally, what options are available to us, comma, because it feels like the last discussion we had is that we would not be able to consider this application again at some point. We needed to procedurally vote no on this application and encourage a new application with consistent drawings that are dated current and match with what expectations relative to easement, curb cuts, parking, and dumpster access acknowledges, of which this application does not yet meet those needs which we had expressed previously.
I do just want to point out that the drawing you're looking at does have a revision date. I believe it's 5/4/24. I can't see it
Yeah, that's
there.
not that- that's-
5/8/24. It's revision number 8 at the top there. So
Can you point, or the applicant, to me where the easement is addressed in the materials or on this drawing?
It's not.
it is not on that drawing.
Okay.
May I add
No?
one more
Oh,
comment?
absolutely.
I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. That's fine.
240 is 240. 256 is 256, and I don't know what 260 is relative to the St. Laurent quote that's in our packet, but I don't know why it's there. Because this is for 240. And thus, I don't really care what's happening on 256. I care that there is reflected language in here that states there is an easement that allows for the full access around, so that that flow pattern that you've named here does work for both properties. I'm not considering this one application for 2 different parcels / a third one. I don't know where that is in the buying and contracting process, and it doesn't address those concerns. I appreciate and want to acknowledge that we got to a place where the occupancy and parking lined up with the approved change of 10 square feet per person, and that there is at least one number for both of those 2 points being reflected tonight.
Okay, anyone else have any questions or comments? In that case, I would entertain a motion. Up or down?
I'll make that motion.
Okay.
Okay. I make a motion that the application submitted by the Masijudul Salaam Mosque to expand the existing parking lot of 240 Bartlett Street and to allow for the use of the northwestern portion of the building and increase occupancy for the southeastern portion of the building meets all the necessary criteria contained in the zoning and land use code, including but not limited to Article 13, Section 4 approval criteria, and that approval be granted with the following conditions. That prior to the issuance of a building permit, the application provides proof of financial capacity for the cost of the project. That prior to issuance of a certificate of occupancy, a professional engineer must provide a stamped statement indicating all stormwater and site improvements have been completed in accordance with the approved plan. That prior to the expansion of occupancy in either section of the building, the applicant would get a building permit and be issued a certificate of occupancy if required. That prior to the issuance of a building permit, the applicant would provide to the city materials detailing how they will regulate the occupancy limits. That the approval is limited to a maximum 70-person occupancy in the northern portion of the building and 122-person occupancy in the southern portion of the building, and that plans reflect the inclusion of traffic flow signage.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Amy is the second, okay. Any further discussion? Shanna?
I can't approve this tonight for some of those same reasons that open you and your neighbors up to significant issues in the future. I'm going to vote no on this tonight, assuming that we're going to take a vote.
Yep.
I welcome you to come back with a fresh application that addresses the side flow, that has some adjustment to the easement, that names the other party with an interest in the easement, has their concerns addressed, and that's reflected here, that the signage is included, and that these other pieces, the majority of them, have been met in advance, so that any changes in occupancy and parking are tight, watertight, and secure, and I don't think that this application as presented is.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, comment? Yes, Amy?
Just one other comment, too. The other inaccuracy in the application is that it's going to be asphalt and not reclaim. So we want to make sure that that's part of the updated.
Yeah.
I think there's, yeah.
Okay, Michael?
I agree with the 2 former comments, and again, I'd like to see a traffic study. Importantly, because emergency vehicles are supposed to be able to make the total circumference as well. I'd like to know if a piece of fire apparatus could make that entire circle, because it seems awful tight on the north end of the property between 240 and whatever the next address is with the big former state building. I'd like to see, assuming that the vote's going the way I anticipate, I'd like to see those on a future application.
I'm sorry,
okay.
I'm not disagreeing with you. Could you repeat that so I can hear it? I just have a little more trouble these days.
Are we catching it in the notes too, so that there'll be a written document in the
Great,
minutes
that's
that
fine.
demands
I'm
exactly
willing
what's
to
needed?
work with that.
They'll give you the minutes and you'll.
That's fine.
Okay.
I caught when you were pointing to your ear. I just want to make sure that there's a traffic study, making sure that fire apparatus can make that full circumference
Okay.
around the, because it's stated right in, I think it's D is the criteria for that. The traffic flow must include emergency vehicles.
We'll look into that.
So that's my concern there.
When I had spoke with Fire Mike, I just want to point out, Michael, that they would most likely come from the road to treat a fire there. So
Well,
it isn't that they couldn't access the site.
Well,
but-
that's why not public comment, that's why department comments are so necessary. To see 4 no comments on this particular development review
That happens.
actually suggests that people are just trying to take a walk, as they would call it in the state legislature. They're taking a walk on these comments. There were comments to be made. There were comments to be made by Public Works. We heard Mr. Bewley's name mentioned. There should be comments from the police department. We heard that Mr. Gagnon was the officer on site. And I'm sure that there are plenty of people up the chain in the police department that understand the concerns here as well. What you passed out earlier tonight was actually dated 2 years ago.
That's because this is when this began and when staff was starting to review the application and when we got comments.
Yeah, and
And
on
since that time, there's been very little change to the application.
On many occasions, like I just heard, this is the 6th meeting. We asked at one point, apparently that's not how it progressed, for an entirely new development review, a packet, an update. At one point, I remember at least one member, myself, probably, asking for the abutters to be re-informed because of the changes. There have been some rather significant changes made since the first meeting. Some of us weren't seated here at the first meeting. I think we were very few people that night, probably only about 5 people, if I remember right.
I was gone.
And as it progressed, it just got sloppier and sloppier. So an entirely new presentation, development review with all the Ts crossed, the Is dotted, and addressing all of the aspects that just seem to just, I got the feeling that people just was hoping that things would just kind of just fall away and be ignored, not remembered as we got here. And yes, at the last meeting that Shanna chaired, I was the one that specifically made the comment on a procedural note, Robert's rules and such, that, we were obligated to make a motion to continue to this meeting. Had we not done that night, someone could have come to yourself, to city staff and say, hey, it now requires a brand-new application. That's the word I was searching for a couple of times, brand-new application. Because it was date certain, and if we just thought that we could just move it to this meeting, somebody could have raised that as an issue. So I brought it up to protect the process in the intervening, what has it been, 4 weeks since that meeting?
Yep. No, anyway. Alex?
Just really quick,
Yep.
just sort of just parse apart Michael's comment there. Is there a mechanism for us to get, a longer form explanation from the other departments beyond just no comment, or like to request explanation of like why they have no comment? What did they do to review it?
We've
Or is there
reviewed this,
really?
it looks great, I have no additional comments. Something.
Yeah,
I mean,
or
Or more than
we
just,
we considered the
checking a
traffic
box.
flow, we considered this, and we found that there's no comment needed from the department, or is that not really part of the process?
So historically, the department sends out the packet. We send it out with that form that you saw tonight, so they always get that. The department either provides that form back or a separate set of response. It's usually an email, and it may just be an email that says, we have no comments on the project, or it may be a set of actual comments or questions that we then send to the applicant. The applicant then responds to it, and typically before it comes before you, all of those have been addressed, and that's what you're used to seeing in our report is that, there's no comment or comments have been addressed. And this is no different than any other application where we went through that process. And since 2002, the departments have seen it.
2022?
Sorry, 2022, the departments have seen it. There's been some back and forth with Public Works, some changes have been made to the stormwater. And there's, staff has gone back a couple of times because of the number of meetings and the questions that have been asked to talk to the fire department about occupancy and, were they involved and the reason it was set at 94 and, is there a concern with having the women's wing be operational and so forth. And then we've also gone back and talked to police and, traffic enforcement isn't the same as the criteria that they use when they review a project to determine if they have a concern. So, the purview of what they're reviewing for and what triggers a traffic study, for example, needing to be done versus, what they're looking for. There's a little bit of a difference there between what they're using for criteria to have a comment or a concern that would not allow a recommendation of approval of a project.
Got it. I think my question was more around, like, is there a process for us as a board to sort of come back and say, well, are you sure you have no comment on this, or is it really we direct you as staff to go?
That's right. It needs to go through staff.
Got it.
May I add
Okay.
a clarifying point to that, Alex?
Sure.
Madam Chair, is that right?
Yeah.
Could we, in the future, similar to how we request the presence and the ability to have dialogue with department heads during the capital investment plan process, could we ask that representatives from each department be authorized to speak on behalf of the department and present here during the review of an application, this or another one, procedurally?
If needed.
I mean, you could certainly make the request. I think.
They don't always show
We're
up,
not
even
going to
for
want them
LCIP,
at every
so.
meeting. It's usually not necessary.
No, but we could make the request if we deemed it to be necessary,
You can
not a
certainly
standing
make the
request.
request. You can
Yeah.
certainly make the request.
Okay.
On that note, I actually made that request a number of years ago. I'm not sure if Lucy was on board at the time. It was Dave Jones that was the Public Works Director. I think the department heads should be obligated to come before us during an LCIP discussion.
Well, yeah, okay, but.
That's what you were referring to, LCIP, right?
I'm just saying, I know that we've made that request, and that request is often met by a department head or representative of the department during that process. And it just, candidly, particularly with this application, the back and forth has been significant over the meetings. We have people giving testimony to third-party conversations that they've had here, and then publicly available documentation that simply says no comment. And we here don't get to show up and not comment.
Right, okay. Yep, all right, so I'm gonna call the roll. Roger Dupree,
No.
Mark Roy,
Nope.
Michael Marcotte.
No.
Shanna Cox,
No?
Alexander Pine,
No.
Amy Smith,
No.
Lucy Bisson, no. I'm sorry. If you guys can come back with, take all of the comments that have been,
Fine.
expressed this evening. I know for me personally, the easement is a big problem. It needs to be addressed, either a new easement that shows that they can go around the building, but there's a lot of stuff that's just not clear.
Could I say one thing?
You can say something.
If
sure.
it's not going to affect anything.
No,
I realize that.
yeah,
I mean, I've obviously been involved with this more than any of us have, except for the gentleman and
Yeah.
you all across the street. And I never have had personally, any question that these kinds of comments and concerns are appropriate. And I'm not trying to defend myself, I'm not, because I didn't do all of this. But I think it is important, and I think this is probably the first time, I used to be on this board a long time ago, but I think this is a very interesting project because there's a lot of components here that have nothing to do, not a lot to do with just design. And I don't mean the people or the way they live life or the way their religion or any of us. It's just a complex site.
Yep.
It's a complex situation. We're all going to, and I appreciate every comment that's come through this group.
Okay.
And,
Thank you.
And I know, personally, I'm pretty sure, I don't know if you could answer this or not, but I'm pretty sure that there is another component that's not going to be part of the mosque, but is part of this site. Yeah, not this site, this area, this community, because I think you're going to be looking at, and I think you already have heard from the Mears project next door.
Yeah. well,
And so
it'll-
all of that
Yep.
is really maybe an interesting thing to see how we can look at all of it.
Yep.
We don't get the opportunity to do that. We have to consider each review application.
No, I
that
do
comes to us
understand that.
separately.
I
Well,
do
it's an important
understand that.
point to make clear, in part because unless there is an application that come by two applicants with
Right.
two parcels,
Yep.
Right.
bringing forward one review application, which is why to make a version of this successful, addressing that easement will be very important.
No, I understand. That's why I say there's just so many components to this, all
Yep.
of this.
Okay, thank
Okay.
you so much. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, and all those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much, and I hope, you have the answers for us next time.
Personal. This is business.
Same here.
I've got a lot invested here.
I understand that.
Oh, I
And
understand.
I just want you to hear from me that I sat professionally, not personally, in this business, listening to you respectfully. And when you engaged, as if you could interrupt me,